Hello again. This is Josh Carr at The Real Angle, and today I am speaking with Diana Lin at Navi Ventures. Diana, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Josh.
Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to meet new people and especially talk about talk about real estate stuff.
hmm
So let's get right into it. I always like to get out of the way the basics. Your company, Navi Ventures, their web address is navi-ventures.com. I always like to get that out because if I don't, invariably someone asks me about that. So let's start with the basics here. What's your role at Navi? What do you do there?
Yes. We had the NAMI for about a couple of years, and what we usually do is we focus on mostly primarily on the value add side for multifamily.
Sure.
So we look at undervalued properties, and then we come in and then we renovate, and then essentially we exit within 3 to 5 years.
Got it. And what markets are you usually operating in?
So right now we're focused in the Arizona market as well as the DFW market, and most recently we're in the New Mexico market.
And just out of curiosity, as long as we're talking markets, physically, where are you physically?
I'm based here in Dallas, Texas, born and raised in Houston,
Got it.
but now we in the good old Dallas.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I'm sure that's a cultural transition. They're different cities. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know I may be a native New Yorker, but I've spent enough time in Texas to understand that Houston and Dallas are not the same thing.
Right,
And that's,
right.
which is fine. Every
Uh-huh.
city's got its own vibe.
Uh-huh.
As a New York native, New York and Boston are not the same thing, right?
hmm
We're our own deal. Um, so cool. So you're doing value add multifamily, which is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I've done a decent amount of multifamily value add stuff in New Jersey. That's frankly how I spend a lot of my day job when I'm not doing this, obviously. How'd you get into it? How did you find yourself launching your own venture, I guess, a couple of years ago, you said?
Yeah, yeah. So we really started, husband and I, we started investing in multifamily back in 2018.
Okay.
And so before then, before doing multifamily full time, I was a full-time architect. So at that time, I was working full time. And when I was interested into investing, multifamily is something that we gravitated toward. So
Okay.
our first step is to sort of educate ourselves and to understand how the investment thesis work. And so we learned and settled on the multi-family syndication as an investment strategy to enter into. And
Okay.
that's kind of how we got started back in 2018 is really started to passively invest into these deals, these
Got it.
syndication deals.
Okay.
So we were able to still work full time at our day job. So
Right.
I was an architect, working full time. My husband, he's a real estate attorney, still is practicing now, but it allows us to be able to invest on the side while we focus on our full-time job. And so we're able to sort of observe how to sort of evaluate deals and also observe this full cycle of our deals. So we've invested in about a couple of these deals, and actually some of these deals went full cycle in 3 years instead
Sure.
of the typical 5-year hold, right? So in 2021, a couple of our deals went full cycle, and that's when we decided that we're going to start to sponsor some deals ourselves.
So there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of moving pieces. So let me
hmm
attack this from a few different angles. So first off, you're an architect by training. Um,
hmm
what kind of architecture were you doing? Were you doing multifamily? Were you doing like single family residential?
Yes,
What were you doing?
mostly large commercial projects. So
Okay.
when I first graduated, I went straight to China for a few years. I graduated in the recession, right?
Okay.
The Great Recession, and
Right.
so
I
back then,
remember.
yeah, yeah,
I,
everybody remembers that.
yeah.
And so there wasn't any job for architects at that time, right? Because real estate was just no job was be
Right.
found.
Right.
But in China, there was a lot of opportunities there for real estate and also for architects. So that is where I gravitated toward. I lived in Beijing, China for about 2 years. And the first thing I worked on was a 40, 50-story tower, right? And so as
That's
this,
exciting for a new architect to be working on big projects. That's pretty
Yes,
cool. That's pretty
yes, and
cool.
then the scale of projects to work out in China, especially as a young architect, is just blown out of scale. I was working on this mixed-use development with three office towers, and each tower is between like 30 to 50 or 60 stories, and a huge podium for retail, right?
Right.
And so really I would plug into this little cog of just designing a portion of it, and then we give it to a local design institute to work out the construction drawings. So I was really a designer working on these beautiful sculptural architectural buildings. They're beautiful, but I didn't know a thing how to actually build it because I knew how to do renderings and drawings and think it looked beautiful. But because I was a foreigner, not a local,
Yeah,
they
sure.
usually
You're not Chinese national.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. They usually give the uh the construction drawing set to a local company, right? So
Right.
for about 2 years, I worked on awesome projects, great scale, but it didn't give me a lot of sort of background in architecture to really fully understand from design all the way to execution of the construction project, right? So yeah, so I was there for a good 2 years, and I came back to Dallas, and I was there for I was Houston for 1 year, then I was in Dallas, and that's where I kind of stayed since then. But since then, I've acquired my architectural license in Texas, and was finally able to touch and learn how to do an actual construction detail and
Right.
to construction drawing set. And the last project I worked on was a 252 key hotel in Dallas, Texas, and that one I had the pleasure to work on from the beginning, from the conceptual drawings all the way to being able to punch walk through each unit of the project itself.
Yeah, and what you're addressing is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I've been an adjunct professor at Columbia University for like 20 years, and that's in the Master's of Science in Real Estate program. It's housed in the School of Architecture, and we get a lot of because in the School of Architecture, I think it's fair to say we have a disproportionate number of students who come from an architecture background who then go through the program because Columbia's got a great architecture program. It's known for that. That's like one of their again, I'm not an architect, so I don't have a dog in this fight, but my understanding is it's considered to be a very good program. Um, and then, the joke is then we get them and kind of like what you're describing, it's like, there's drawing the pretty picture and then there's the actual nuts and bolts of, well, how do we make sure this thing doesn't
Mm-hmm.
fall down? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like actually build a building.
Right.
And, in all fairness, I think a lot of times people beat up on architects for that, but at the same time, just like an architect may not know how to, do concrete work, that doesn't mean the concrete work guy knows how to do architecture. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we all have a seat at the table, so to speak.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not an attorney, but I've read enough contracts that I'm now at a place where I can point out a few things in a contract to the attorney. I'm
Right.
not going to practice law, but I can be like, well, that looks weird, like
Right.
just
Right.
because you've done it for a while.
Right.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. So you went from architecture, you did some investing as an LP, and then I guess at some point got the bug and said, let's do this ourselves. I'm just curious, was that because you were in these deals and you just said, I could do a better job? Or was it that you were in the deals and said, I want to get out of architecture? Kind of
Right. Yes.
what
No,
was
that's a
rattling
great.
around in your head when you
Yeah.
made that
Yeah. It,
jump?
it was a combination of things because we knew that, well, at least I knew that real estate was a path that I wanted to get toward because even during architecture school, I was always interested in real estate development, right?
Sure.
And so first I wanted to get my architectural experience, and it was through the long hours of working as an architect, sometimes pulling all-nighters and
Hmm.
working for clients that would, give pretty demanding deadlines. But I wanted to gravitate toward real estate investing because eventually my long-term goal is to build enough equity myself to be able to start to invest, and then
Sure.
in a couple of years be able to even be a developer for my own projects, right?
Right.
And even now, like we're finally we have the a project right now that we were developing in New Mexico, and
Yeah,
that'll be
let's talk about your project, your current project,
yeah,
because
yeah,
I wanted to
yeah.
get to the
And
actual
so
deal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, um, in terms of like, the interest of how we sort of like got into it is, we got into multifamily value add because it's less risky to us, right? With development, you get a lot bit more upfront costs into the soft costs, maybe up to 200 to $300,000 into pre-development fee, and then you may
Sure.
not be able to close on a deal because you lose all that money. So it was a lot riskier than say to purchase a value add that's already cash flowing from day one. And
Right.
so we place the money into an existing hard asset and start to really just renovate and then later resell it. And so it was less risky proposition. So when we did a couple of those is when we started to build more personal equity. And then so that's when we're more comfortable enough to take a riskier investing, which is to development.
Right. And also I imagine, I mean, at least it's been my experience that, with development, it just takes a lot of time, and not just the work. I'm not talking about the work. I'm talking about the waiting for the next step, right? It's waiting for
Mhm.
approvals, and you could be sitting there quite some time just waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. Whereas
Right,
with
right.
value add stuff, you have an
Mhm.
operating asset. You get in it, you're working on it from day one.
Yeah.
There's just, it's nice to get going on things. So,
Yes. Yes.
and the and so when you started doing value add stuff, as you said, you're based in Dallas. Your first deal, like where are you? What markets are you heavy in right now? Because I know you threw out a few markets, but like where's your
Yeah,
new
yeah.
stuff?
So the first deal that we actually invested in was actually in Arizona, right?
Okay,
And then the last deal that we closed for Value Add was in Dallas, as our
okay,
backyard. So really our approach when we get into a new investment class or to learn how to, so for example, when we were investing as a passive investor and stepping into as a more active sponsor, we knew that it was critical to find a partner to help us sort of oversee the whole project with us, but working side by side.
hmm
So Arizona's always been a market that we've been interested in, but in order for us to be comfortable to step into it, we need to find a partner that has already been a player in the market for a couple of years, right?
sure,
So
sure.
we were able to find a partner and mentor us to partner with us on our first deal in Arizona. So that was really our first deal as a sponsor. With a small project, it's only 20 feet in it. It was, small enough for us to wrap our head around and not too big of a project for us to be scared of, right?
But
So
you need that local person. You need that local
hmm
person. I mean, I know from my own experience, like I've done different things over my career, and I'm
hmm
looking at the deal down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana right now. And now I'm a New Jersey guy, but there's a guy down in that market that I like, that I trust, that I have a relationship with. So then it's
hmm
like, okay, well, you found a deal that makes some sense.
Right.
I'll go halvesies on it, but otherwise, I'd never. I mean, no knock on Baton Rouge, but I would have never just sat there on my own and been
Exactly.
like, I want to go do this market because it's
Exactly.
not my market.
Exactly. Yeah. So really, we kind of stumbled upon entering into Arizona market because we found a partner that we were able to sort of work side by side and to get into our first deal, right?
Sure.
So it's the same thing for our development deal, right? And that's how we're in Mexico. We needed a partner with experience that we trusted and
hmm
to work
hmm
side by side, right? And then that's kind of what we do for a lot of our investments that we don't know ourselves. We have to, if we don't know enough, we need to find a partner that knows more than us, right? And so that's just more of a risk mitigation than to make sure that we're protecting
You
ourselves,
see,
right?
everything you're saying makes sense to me, and it's everything that I don't hear out of people who went to B school. Because I
hmm
often find that B school tends to be more like, well, you're going to have a strategy and you're going to have a map and you're going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of these markets and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be analytical, but at the same time, if you're going to go into a market you don't know, you need to work with people you have trust with and that you like and that you have that. And a lot of what you're talking with trust is, there's practical stuff, and then I imagine there's also sort of intuitive, emotional, like I want to work with this person.
Right,
It's not just what's on
exactly.
paper. It's like we
Yes,
we click.
yes, yes, exactly. And it was kind of a thing that I was even debating about that years ago about whether or not as an architect I should go to a school or go to a program like Columbia to
Sure.
go transition from as an architect to a developer. But in after investing a couple of years, it's like, okay, well, the best way to learn is to do it. But
100%. 100%.
you know, like
100%.
so uh why not skip that? Not saying that it's not relevant. I do think it's very valuable, but the faster way to get to it is to do it, but do it with someone that will mentor you and guide you through the process, pillar it a lot faster because there's so much that theoretical real estate theories, that
I,
can
I, I
help.
get it. Look, I mean, I've taught at the graduate level
Right.
for years, and there's a lot to be said for graduate school education, but at the same time, and there is. I mean, I always think of graduate school education as kind of like, look, we're going to cover all the topics, and it's going to be broad, you know,
Mhm.
but it's kind of like if you want to go to a foreign country, you can either just go backpacking and see stuff, and maybe you won't hit certain sites, but you'll see the things you want to see, as opposed to sort of organized tours where you see everything, but did you
Mhm.
ever really get to know the people, so to speak,
Right, right.
And
Uh-huh.
it's kind of the same thing. It's like grad school's great for like big picture topics, but if you know you want to do value add multifamily in Arizona, find a mentor, do value add multifamily in Arizona. Like just,
Exactly. It's
you know,
simple as that.
yeah, like fine, you won't cover all these other topics, but maybe you were never going to do hotels anyway, so who cares?
Right.
Like
Yes.
um and yeah, that's so my grand conclusion after teaching 20 plus years at grad school is in many cases don't go to grad school.
Right.
Which maybe I shouldn't say that, but it 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 has its place. It has its
Yes.
place, but
And
it's
you know,
not like
I went to architecture school for 5 years, right? So then
sure.
it's a gave sort of broad knowledge space, but you don't know architecture. It's like you do
Hmm.
architecture. So
Hmm.
it's the same thing.
No, it's funny. I've spent a lot of my time talking to the tradespeople, and
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I've seen too many designs by architects that the trades look at it and they're like, buddy, that's not buildable. Like that looks great on paper, but I have no idea how the F to build that works.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
just,
Right.
there's a
Right,
lot to
right.
be.
And then
It's
so, stepping into the owner side instead of being a service provider, right?
hmm,
It's so different because as an architect, you're kind of plugged into the whole puzzle, right?
hmm,
You work on
hmm,
design
hmm.
and construction drawing, but then as a developer, there's so many other moving parts happening that now being on the other side, being used to be an architect before, it just tells me that so out there I don't know. And so I'm learning on the spot to educate myself and learn where I need to learn.
Sure.
But well, it's been a humbling process.
No, it is, and being honest about your deficiencies. Like, I
No,
don't
no.
fix elevators for a living, but that doesn't mean I can't talk to the elevator person and
Right,
learn a few
right.
things about elevators, and that's okay.
Exactly. Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm curious from a funding source standpoint. I mean, you've been an LP in other people's deals. Now you're doing your own thing. Do you have
Mhm.
LPs in your deals? You're syndicating your
Yes.
deals?
Yes. So we took the same sort of business model of what we've invested as
Sure.
LP into as the owner side as a sponsor. We syndicated our first deal, and so our last three deals that we did for value add were all syndications, and even our development deal we're merging the syndication model into the owner as well.
So here's my question, I guess. Now that you've been on both sides of the table, been an LP and been a GP, do you think that being an LP for a period of time made you a better GP? Like, and if so, how? Like, how did that affect your perspective on this?
Yes, I do think so because as an LP, you have a different set of perspective. You just need to know how to underwrite well, vet your sponsors, and know the location. And,
Sure.
when you experience which deals do well, which deals do not do well, then you gain that experience as well. And so, as an LP, what you are expecting from GPs to give you sort of account communication that throughout the process, right? So stepping into the GP mode, GP side, I'm able to take what I've learned as an LP to provide that sort of expectation to LPs to make them happier because, some deals were in an LP with basically no communication. And that's not because we didn't have much experience. We thought that was normal, right? But
Right.
when we
Right,
were
right, right, right.
partnering with another when we partner with the first partner, they send out monthly updates to their LP investors. Like, okay, well, that's a lot better. Like I would like that, right? To know what's the pulse of the project every month. So start to adapt that sort of approach as well. But I think, as an LP, what I noticed with our whole investment, that we noticed that the deals that did really well were really because the sponsor was good, right?
Sure.
And when you get deal decks and the numbers look amazing, right? It doesn't matter if it's good, because if the sponsor can't actually execute the business model
Yeah,
and the plan, it's not going to happen, right?
it's active
So
management.
I
Yeah,
feel like, on top of looking at locations, underwriting, and market, right? You you want to make sure that the sponsor behind the deal are actually experienced and or are organized, right?
hmm
And
hmm
knowing what they're doing. So that's important as an LPs to vet those sponsors. So even as general partners now, if you do partner with other partners, you want to vet them too. So taking that experience at LP into GP as well to kind of vet your partners, right? So it kind of boils down to the people, who's the captain of the ship, who's driving it,
right.
and that, I think, it would dictate the success of the project.
No, and that's a fair point. That's a fair point. I mean,
Hmm.
it does often come back to leadership. It does often come
Hmm.
back to who's actually running the thing. And it's funny because as a GP, I've been asked all kinds of questions by LPs over the years. And, you know, I don't mean to be mean here. There's the old joke about how there's no such thing as a stupid question. That's not
Hmm.
technically correct. Like some
No.
questions are not relevant to the deal,
Right.
but if I get a question that isn't relevant to the deal, then it's like, okay, well, did I miscommunicate the deal? Because you're asking me a question that shows that you don't understand the deal. So either I did a bad job at communicating or something got lost in translation, but like the fact you're going off on this tangent, or maybe you just had that as an issue on your last deal, so now you're asking about it, which happens sometimes. Some of the questions I've been
Hmm.
asked, it seems more, well, on your last deal you got screwed over because of these five things, so now those are the five things you want to make sure aren't a problem, which is great, but like that's like a small piece because you know, well, you get the idea.
Right.
No, it's interesting. So I guess now that you're kind of doing your own thing, which is great, one question I always like to ask people, surprises along the way, now that you're kind of doing your own thing, surprises for good or for bad about what it's like to be a GP versus being an LP.
Yes, that's a really good question, because when you come into real estate, you hear about the hurrah hurrah of real estate and reclaiming your time back and you're financially free. So
Mm-hmm.
that's always a dream, is that you do real estate and then suddenly you have all this time in your hand. You could just travel the world.
Sure. Just be
It's
all day long, sitting on the beach, drinking Mai Tais and,
I
you
wish I
know,
could. It happened to me when the 1 year of investing. That's not how it works. It's a long game, right?
it
So
is a long
even
game.
as an LP, I'm an impatient person, right? So I'll just like, when is this happening? Where's my time?
Sure. Sure, sure,
But
sure, sure.
it takes a long time as an LP to get toward that financial freedom. So the idea is to step into being a sponsor to get there faster, right? Because then you get
Right.
the promote, you get you do all that work in order to earn a little bit more money, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So stepping into the other side, what I through realize, or the misnomer maybe, right, is I'm just even busier. Like
Sure,
that.
sure. Yeah, no, it is definitely a lot of work, and I think that's a fair statement. I mean, there are a lot of YouTube celebrities who have you convinced that you could just work 4 hours and that would be it, and you'll be
Uh-huh.
independently wealthy, and it's fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Forgetting that this is a job.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is a job. But I guess the what is nice is that instead of working for someone and clocking in, clocking out,
Sure.
you basically set your own schedule,
Yes,
but
you do.
you still have your own, you're still running a company that's a startup, right? And as running a startup, you're wearing all the hats. So wearing all the hats, then you're just busy, especially in the first few years.
No, but the control of your schedule is definitely a dead on point. I mean, I know for myself, like I've got a spouse and children, and it's nice to have that flexibility where you need to. I mean, it's even things like you need to do a parent teacher conference. I mean, they schedule those in the middle of the day. When
Mhm.
it's your company, you can just go to it. You don't have
Yeah.
to like tell your boss. And just the fact that I can just go to it and then come back to work, great.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's so that's when people talk about freedom. It's more about it's not about the sitting on the beach for 2 weeks. It's about
Right.
you can go to
Hmm.
your parent teacher conference and not have to get it like an approval from someone to do it.
Yes. Yes.
It's those little things. When
Yes.
you get to the office 10 minutes late, no one's like giving you stink eye. You're like, no, dude, it's my company.
Yes.
I can get here 10
Yeah.
minutes late. Like
Exactly.
I earned that right now. So yeah,
Exactly.
no, it's good. So just to sort of shift gears a little bit, talk future stuff. So you're working on new deals. What do you want to be working on in a year, 3 years, 5 years? Do you want to keep doing multifamily value add? Are there other? Do you want to get into ground up development? Do you have visions of other markets? Where what do you want to grow into, I guess?
Yes, so I was going to do more ground up development because that is what my interests lie primarily. And
Sure,
if there are some deals out there that are good, especially for value add, I'd be more happy to kind of jump to it as well. So it really depends on what makes sense on the deal, right? And whether or not it's too risky or if the deal makes sense. So I think I'll be doing more developments in a couple of years, maybe even land entitlement, and along the way making strategic partners. Because if I do all of them at the same time, I'm really not going to have time at all. Because I have two
sure,
little kids; they're 2 years old and 4 years old, and so I want to really whoever in real estate is to be able to spend time with them, right? So being picky about what deals to get on, but being strategic with our time. And so
sure.
I like to focus on actually little smaller projects, maybe 20 to 50 unit properties where I can actually buy with our own capital without
Right.
syndication.
Just
And
control the
so
whole
just
process.
control the whole project and eventually cash flow for 10 plus years, right? Or forever. So that,
And there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, everyone talks about other people's money in our industry, but people forget that raising money from other people takes work too. So
yes.
maybe in some cases it makes sense just to use your own money and do your own deals, and then you
Hmm.
answer to no one but yourself or your
Right.
family, if you will, and that's
Right.
that. And
Yes,
then that's that.
exactly. Yes. And for these syndication is that you're raising money, multi-million dollar deals, and you tell the investors you got we're going to be in it for only 3 to 5 years. You have to hold back your word and exit within 3 to 5 years. So when you're just you and one other partner, then you can dictate whether or not you want to sell it or just hold on to it for X number of years.
I had a couple transactions where we ended up exiting them coming out of COVID, and we ended up holding them longer than we wanted to, and people
No
were
blame.
grumpy about it. But it's like, look, selling it in the middle of COVID would result in losing a ton of money. So
Hmm.
like, I understand what it says on paper, that we should sell it sooner, but in practice, it would be you'd be setting fire to it to sell it in the middle of COVID. Wait till the market
Right.
stabilizes, and COVID, as you know, took time. Like
Hmm.
that's just life. Stuff happens.
Right, right. And so you were flexible in your exit plan, right? With property.
Unfortunately, yes, and but I'm not going to destroy value because people get twitchy, But as you're saying, if it's your deal, you don't have to answer to anyone. Whereas if you're, have LPs, you're managing that process. Well, no, this is exciting. I think you're in a very interesting phase, and I guess my only last question is, I know that you came from the architecture background. It sounds like you've sort of beaten the architecture bug. It doesn't sound like you're doing your own drawings and doing your own design. You're using
Hmm.
another firm for that. You're using an outside firm for that, from what I can gather.
Hmm.
Um, any interest in sort of indulging yourself at some point and doing a little bit of
Oh
architecture, or
yeah,
is that kind
for
of off the?
sure. I mean, I think I, the idea to get into development with an architectural background is to design my own project, right?
Sure.
So kind of basically when I started from first year out of school is to do that design and get it to if architect to do all the technical stuff, right?
Right.
I'll be able to dictate the direction and look of the design, right? So that, as a client, as a developer now, right, then you're able to do the final rubber stamp on what it looks like based on what you want. But now with the knowledge of numbers and balancing that, then it's definitely easier to make that informed decision rather than just coming out of architecture school, just want to build a Taj Mahal, right?
Sure. Not worrying about the cost of materials.
Yeah,
You can,
yeah.
sure,
Uh-huh.
sure.
But I mean, we had the architectural background is definitely useful during the whole process, even for value add, right? Like we had to go through the process of converting our laundry room into a unit, a leasable unit, and so we hired an architect to take care of the drawing set, right?
Hmm.
And so the city came back saying, okay, for this 22 unit, which is our first deal that we sponsored, they told us that in order to convert this 350 square feet laundry room into a unit, we need to put fire sprinklers in every building.
Right.
That's one unit you gotta put. Now you have to go up the code for all the units, even
Which
though
is a
we're not
huge
touching them.
expense. It's a
It's a
huge
huge expense,
expense.
so it just
Yeah.
makes no sense. And so I asked architect, what kind of ways we can go about to go around it, or how do we address this? And he's like, oh, we already talked to them. They said they don't seem like they want to budge. I'm like, really? Basically kind of threw her hands up and didn't want to try to find solutions. And I'm like, that's not
Sure.
being an architect. So
Right.
I had to step in, right? So I stepped in and I called city myself, had a conversation with the fire marshal, had a conversation with the city department reviewer, and had them even like go on an email chain together and found out, based on going through the code as well that we can qualify for a 2022 IECC, the international existing code,
Right.
and instead of the current that they qualified the permit set for 2019. So we wrote this 2 and 3 page code modification request that this is going to qualify for 2022, and so let's try to be more lenient on this. And after a couple of weeks, the city came back saying, okay, you know,
No, and the devil's in the details. It's bringing that specialized skill set to the conversation, which
right.
someone I'm not an architect, so
Uh-huh.
unfortunately, if my firm came to me and said this is a problem, I'd probably know there was a way around it, but I wouldn't know how
Hmm.
to execute on that. I
Yes, yes, yes.
I wouldn't be the one actually like going through the code. That's not my skill
Right,
set.
right. Yeah. So I work with the architect closely. It's like, hey, there is a way to get around it or how
Right.
to address it. This
Sure.
is exactly giving her exact steps of what to do. Even
Right.
though she's a licensed architect in Arizona, doesn't mean that not all architects are created equal, right? So working closely with her to find a solution. And so now they came back, they only need to do fire sprinkler for that one unit instead of all the units.
Which is a win, and also, as I'm sure you've had the experience with service providers, it's also just not their skill set. It's also just not their project. At the end of the
Hmm.
day, if it's your project, you always by definition care more than everybody else because that's just the
Yes,
way life is.
yes,
That's the way
right.
life
And
is.
so, moving from as an architect to value add or to investing side, what was really pretty transferable skill set was getting pretty comfortable with asset managing, right? Because
Hmm.
even as an architect, you're mostly project managing a large team to make a large commercial project come from the ground. So going to asset managing, you're doing the same thing. You're making sure that you have a team to make sure that you're executing a business plan. So you work closely with the property manager, you work closely with the contractor for CapEx, right? And so you want to make sure that everything is going according to plan. It's similar kind of stuff that we do as an architect all the time. And so even into our new build in New Mexico, it's also doing the same thing, asset managing. We're interviewing with property managers, we're shopping for debt, we're talking to the debt providers. And so we're pulling all the pieces together, but we're doing it for the sake of getting this project off the ground, right?
This is all exciting stuff, and this is honestly why I wanted to get you on the phone was just to talk about sort of that transition from architect service provider to owner operator to kind of the final point, which is the vision of longer term doing developments and still doing some design drawings and having your vision and putting your stamp on it. I think
Hmm.
it's funny. We always come back to our initial skill sets eventually. So it sounds
Right,
like the
right.
long term goal is in some ways to end up where you started.
Yeah, and
Which is
much more comprehensive and more well equipped to do it,
sure,
right?
sure,
Yeah,
but effectively to go back to I make drawings of things of big
right,
projects, but being the
right,
owner of it,
exactly.
it's funny the way life often takes us back to what we knew already. Um,
Uh-huh.
well, look, this has been very constructive. I'm glad we got to go through this. I've asked the questions I wanted to ask, and I thank you for your time on this.
No
And for
problem.
everyone listening again, this was Diana Lin at Navi Ventures, navi-ventures.com, doing value add multifamily development and also hopefully soon some ground up development. Diana, thank you again for your time. Excellent.
Thank you so much, Josh.